In today's video, we're up to the letter X in my series of using the iPad in Procreate and showing you how to draw animals as letters of the alphabet. And for the letter X, we're gonna be drawing these X-ray fish. It's all in real time too, just like all my videos, you can follow along every single step of the way. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, everyone, so let's go ahead and get started. So today's video is gonna take a little bit different of an approach than the previous videos, just because we're gonna talk a lot about layer management today. So there's gonna be a lot of duplicating layers, grouping layers, flipping layers around. So I think that's something that you can definitely use in your own work. So a lot of information crammed in this video you don't wanna miss out on. Just wanted to give you a heads up to begin with. But beginning to start this, I'm using a 4000 pixel by 4000 pixel 300 dpi canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brushes today, I'm gonna be using my creator set for Procreate, available for purchase on Gumroad. I'll link that down in the description below. Get all those brushes, plus there's, I think, over 3 hours worth of tutorial videos that come included with that. So something you don't wanna miss out on either. And then finally, the color palette for this, I've got pre-made. So if you wanna download those for free, you can get them on my website, bjdell.com. It's linked down below to page 13 of the YouTube reference materials. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm gonna get my X in there in the background first. So I wanna pull up my actions menu. I'm going to add text. I'm gonna hit X and then double tap on the X to highlight it so we can change the font by tapping on the font. Then I'm gonna come down here to Arial and select Arial, just because that's what we've used for this whole series. Then we'll hit done. I'm gonna grab my arrow for transform, and with uniform and snapping selected, we're gonna drag this out and make it fairly big here. Then we want an orange line both horizontally and vertically so that we know it's centered. Okay. With that done, then we'll lock it in by hitting the layers menu here. And I'm gonna hold down on X, drag it down underneath layer 1, hit N for blend mode, and drop the opacity on this down to about 10%. You wanna be able to see it, just don't want it to be too dark. Okay. And then layer 1, we'll sketch there using that brainstorm sketch brush and using black. So with this, the way I see the X and the fish is to have basically a fish here stacked on top of a fish here. So instead of drawing that fish twice, and also instead of using the symmetry function, we're going to, like I said, do a lot of layer management up here that's gonna speed up our process as well. Just another kind of approach on how to get this done without drawing the same fish twice. So now that that's kind of sorted out, we're gonna start here, kind of come down at a point, start to pull a curve line from the bottom of that X to the top of this one. And then coming down to a point there, pull this bottom out towards the top of that X there. And just kind of darkening up as we come back around. From here then I can work on the tail, kind of pulling curve line here out, curve line here out, and connecting those. Like so. Getting a little close there to the edge, but that's okay. I'll pull some lines here. The inside, get the breakup of that fin there. Okay. Coming up here to the top, then I'm going to zoom in here to the face so we can kind of start working on that. So obviously a side view here, profile view. We'll get the eye in here, just with the curve line coming up here. And then we'll do a curve line. Has a round end here for the cheek. Curve line there for the front of the eye, and then we can go ahead and get the pupil in there. And then the iris behind there. Do a kind of diagonal line there for the lid, and then we'll get an eyebrow on top of here. Pulling that down, just kind of filling in. Okay. Now we'll have the smile coming back in here. It comes down to that bottom lip there. A nice soft curve line there. A little smile crease there. And then we'll pull the top of the mouth here. Kind of connect that, maybe giving a little bit of a lip there at the end. All right, that looks good. From here then, I'm going to pull in just the face curves here, just so we can separate the face from the body. Just kind of pull in some curve lines there, like so. From there then, we can pull in a fin back here. So if we want to block in a shape for the fin lightly there to kind of follow around. Pull in a curve line back here. Just like with these U shapes, just kind of continue those back around. And then where these curve into right there, that center portion, we'll just pull in some lines so it breaks up that fin. Just like that. I think he's looking pretty cute so far. All right. Kind of working our way back now. We'll have a top fin here. Pull this back in towards the body. Once again, that curve there where those meet, we'll pull in the line there towards the body for that part to break up that fin. And just darkening up those lines as I come back through. Because we are going to drop the opacity on this one just like we did with that text layer. So we want to make sure that everything's dark enough that once we drop the opacity, we're still going to be able to see it. All right. Now for the bottom fin here, kind of the same thing. Just pulling some curve lines down and then back up. Towards the body there. Maybe even a smaller one up here in the front too. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. Moving our way back down then, of course, we need to be see-through here. He's going to be X-ray after all, so I'm going to draw in a curve line here, kind of for the spine of the fish. Once again, just being really loose and sketchy because we are going to ink this later. So I'm just trying to get the flow of that line best I can. Now we're going to start to pull in some ribs here. So with some curved lines, just kind of making these smaller as they go in towards the back of the fish here. So by the time they get here to the tail, they're going to be pretty small. All right, and then overall, I think that is pretty good for our sketch. Like I said, we're gonna flip this, duplicate it, all that good stuff. So we only have to draw this once, and I think that looks pretty good. I am gonna kind of change the flow of this line here and have it come up instead of having it come back the way it does. Just to kind of make it more wavy there. That looks a little bit better. So from here then, we're ready to move on to adding the inks. So let's begin that next. So to do the inks, we're going to come up here to our layers menu. I'm going to turn off the X for right now. Actually, let's make this, if you need to on yours, I've got this really close to the edge here. So I'm going to make this just a little bit smaller. So with that one highlighted, that blue, I'm going to slide this one to the right. So now these are both selected. And then with my arrow here, I can go ahead and shrink this down just a little bit. And I can move these at the same time. Once again, just getting them centered here. That's close enough. So now I've got a little bit more leeway there at the bottom. All right, so I'm going to turn off the X then. I'm going to make a new layer on top of layer 1, and then I'm going to hit N for blend mode on layer 1 because I'm going to drop the opacity of this down about 20% or so. Once again, I want to see it. I just don't want it to be too dark. Okay. That done then, layer 3, we're going to draw on top of that one, switching over our brush to our smooth inker. And I'm going to tap on this because I want to come into stabilization and I want to make sure streamline is turned up to the max here. This is going to help with really long strokes to kind of free up jittery lines. If you've got hesitation in your lines, it's going to alleviate some of the pressure there too. We'll hit done, and we can go ahead and start. So I think, honestly, I might as well just get one of the big lines out of the way. So I'm going to start here, just come up and around, holding down to lock it in. If you want to try it a few times, just to make sure. Once you lock it into, it changes, you can see it changes the trajectory of that just ever so slightly. So you might need to do that a few times to get that trajectory just right so they match up. All right, got that locked in. Now I'm going to zoom in here so I can pull these lines around and have a little bit more control. I'm going to, once again, hold down my eraser so I can select that same brush that I'm drawing with as my eraser. I'm going to pull in these lines. Try that one more time so I don't worry about hitting that line I just did. Now this curve here, the way that those match up, you might have to fine tune that a little bit so that looks like one complete line there rather than two lines that you stopped and started separately. Of course, if you wanted to, you could have tried to make that whole swooping motion coming up and around. I just think that's a really long line, and sometimes I try to avoid huge lines like that. All right, pulling the smile line around here, tapered line for the eyes around there, and sometimes I'll come in with my eraser too and clean up the tapers on the end. Now with these tapered lines, the technique here with this brush is just like a regular inking brush. So it's not going to do the work for you. It does require kind of a technique and a skill. So it's a light pressure to begin with, coming into a heavier pressure and then letting up pressure at the end. It really is something that you have to become accustomed to. So if you have these brushes and you're not getting the exact same results, there's no, hidden settings or secret sauce to them. The pressure curve in Procreate, I just use the default, so there's nothing there in settings. If you have these brushes, you're using the exact same settings that I am, as long as you have the pressure curve set on the default with Procreate. So if you aren't getting the same results, just try again. We'll hold down white in the background here to add in some ovals here for the highlights in the eyes, and then we'll hold down and switch back to the black here. Switch back to the black. Okay, coming in here then, I'm going to erase this line. So I've got a gap there for the eyebrow. We'll pull up a curve here for that. Had a little bit of an overlap there, so I need to come in. And I've talked before about, on cases like this, using two different layers, and we'll do that here shortly so I can explain the benefits of using two different layers so you don't have to worry about that. And actually, we'll probably do it right here. So I'm going to come up to my layers menu. I'm going to make a new layer to do this line here. I like to start outside of the curve so that way I already have kind of my pressure locked in. I've got the flow of the stroke coming around, and I don't have to worry about hitting it the wrong way. I just want this curve to match up the flow of that curve coming around. And then erasing that, you can see now I've got a lot more control over the way that line starts. I'm actually even going to come in here with the transform tool and warp, and I'm going to pull this line just a little bit back some more, because I did like the curve that I had there initially. It just meets up with the face a lot better up there at the top, or the top of the head. Then you can kind of see what we've got there. All right, I'm going to switch back now. I'm going to keep that layer. I'm going to switch back to this first layer we did, so I can do this fin here, and that way I can overlap these fins with that face again, just like that, so that way, once again, I've got control over those lines, and then I can erase the overlaps here. I don't have to worry about the lines that I've already done, except for that smile line there, because I did extend that line out pretty gosh darn far. So I will have to be careful on that taper. All right. And you see too, that did not match up with my sketch. Once again, the sketch, I've talked about this a lot. The sketch is just a kind of setting to where you can visualize where something's supposed to go. It's not the be all end all that you have to 100% trace. It's just a suggestion of where it's going to go and mapping it out. So I'm going to go back to layer 4 here. Same thing down here to do this one. I'm going to come up past that line so that I can come in and erase. I don't have to worry about those ones that I have already done. I think I'm going to pull this one down a little bit further though. I think that's a little close and it's almost making a tangent there where those lines match. And I might even do like a third one here. No, I'll just do 2. All right. I think that looks a little bit better just because that's not as close to the body, this section back here. Okay. Continuing on then, we can do the same thing here with these. Pulling up these lines around where those connect then. We'll pull back in for the fin there. And using the eraser. Now that one trick that I used with the transform, if you're using, multiple layers on this, I think honestly this needs more than one. If you're using multiple layers, you won't be able to use that warp trick because it's going to warp the entire section that you've drawn. I think this one needs 3 coming down here. So we'll do 1, 2, and then 3. And pull that back up. These need to be kind of like the curve of the outside line there though, so I needed to fine tune those. I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll continue the same thing here on the top. Pull this one back out and around. And that line coming back in towards the body, following that curve of the top. And erase the overlaps. You see how much easier that makes things than trying to match up and stopping exactly where that line is. Okay, we'll come in here, zoom in towards the tail and get this knocked in, and then we can work on the bones. All right, so we'll start to pull this around from one side to the other. No, I may make this a little bit wider so it doesn't come into a complete point there. Pull it like that. I think that looks a little bit better. We can pull this one down in the center. And pull lines down here. See, once again here, I'm adding in an extra curve line there that I didn't have in the sketch just because I think it benefits from having an extra one there. That first one though here needs to be a little bit closer. So this needs to be, symmetrical. You want the one on the one side to match the one on the other. That looks a little bit better there. Okay. Looking good. So I'm going to come back up here to my layers menu. I'm going to pinch together the ones that we've already done now. And then I'm going to make another new layer for the inside here of that spine coming up. And this I want pretty thin. And I'm going to make another new layer now, just to have really total control over this. Oops, make another one here, and then using that warp tool again, I can start to pull this out and kind of fine tune how wide the separation is between those lines. That way I can make sure it's perfect. And then locking in with the layers menu, I can pinch these two together so they're all on one. And then using that eraser, I can come in here and just erase the overlaps. And you see how much easier that makes things than trying to start and stop that line before it hits all those areas. All right, looks good. Once again, back up to the layers menu. We can go ahead and pinch those together now. Actually, before I do that, I see a little bit of a missed part right there. So layers menu, pinching those together so they're all on one, and then another new layer here so that we can come in and do those ribs. And I'm going to twist and turn the canvas here a little bit So I have better control over these lines. And I'm going to start these here inside the center. Bring those around. I think it needs to be a little bit thinner though. It needs to have a little bit of a curve there. And then we'll erase the overlaps there. Just want to make sure, zoomed out, that that looks good. We can go ahead and even fine tune it a little bit more. If you want to fine tune the curve here, you can. I would recommend doing that though before you do the erasing in the middle, because you might pull back a little bit further. Here it's fine because it actually pulled it in, but I think that looks good. And then from here then, we can go ahead and make another one. Twisting again. This though, once again, I'm going to make another new layer here. And just try this a couple times to get the right shape that I'm looking for and the right length. I want it to, match up to the one that I've got here. So it might take a few times to get it exactly right. Then using the warp tool here, I can extend it if I want to. I can pull it back in, give it more of a curve. I think that looks pretty good. Now, instead of drawing that every single time, the other option that you have is, if we go ahead here to that one, we can slide this to the left and duplicate it. Then using that arrow in freeform, we can just pull this down. Make it smaller, just where it sits on the canvas. Then same thing here with that one that we did. Duplicate that one again, drag it down. I'm going to use uniform this time and shrink it down here. Pull that one down, and then finally one more time, duplicating that first one. And I always duplicate the first one because once you start moving these, changing the shapes of them, they will start to kind of deteriorate in quality. So if you're doing it with the one that you just made every single time, it's going to drop significantly between the first and the last. That's why I always like to use the first one, so you maintain at least the best quality possible. All right. So with those now, we need to erase the overlaps. We didn't do that first because duplicating those, they might sit differently from one to the next. So we're going to pinch all of those together now. And then using that eraser, we can come in here and erase the overlaps. Just like that. Okay. Now, since the inks are done there, I can pinch all these onto one and then pinch these onto one. Now everything's all together. The inks are all on the same. I'm going to turn off the sketch layer and you can see what we're left with, and we're ready to add in our color flats. So to begin our color flats, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to our layers menu. I'm going to tap on layer 3. I'm going to set this as reference. Then I'm going to come under layer 3 and make a new layer. So this allows us to drag and drop all of our colors onto layer 4 using layer 3 as kind of a guide where everything's supposed to go. With that done then, we've got the first blue here. We'll drag and drop that for the body color of the fish. Next up, we've got the lighter blue. We'll use that as the face. Next up, we've got a darker blue. We'll use that for the eyebrows and all the fins. I'm going to drag once and hit continue filling. So that way I can just tap on all these sections and it will quickly fill these in without having to drag and drop every time. All right, with that done then, back up to the color palette. Got the yellow here for the bones. Continue filling again. We'll tap on these, making sure not to hit the lines. Because if you hit the lines, it's going to fill in the outlines, which I'm going to have to zoom in here for this last one to really get in there. Showing you here what I'm talking about. If you hit the lines and you're zoomed out, you might not notice that you hit those lines, and you can see, as we zoom in, you've got this really jagged outline. A lot of times you might have that happen, move 10, 20 steps forward with your design and then realize it once you zoom in. And that's pretty rough because then you have to undo all the work that you just did. So definitely zoom in on tight spots like that just to make sure that you've got them knocked in where they're supposed to be. All right, and then finally I'm going to turn the background off here because we've got the white of the eye we need to fill in. So let's hold down on the background color for the white. We'll drag and drop that in for the white of the eye, and then we've got this green here that we'll use for the iris. Okay, and there we go. There's the color flats, super quick, super easy. So from here then, ready to move on, start doing that layer management that I hinted at the beginning of the video, and then we'll add the shadows and the highlights. All right, so next up then, let's move on to duplicating and the layer management here. With layer 4 selected, I'm going to go ahead and also select layer 3 by sliding that one to the right, and then I'm going to go ahead and group them. So we have a new group that contains those two layers. I'm going to go ahead then, select this new group by tapping on it, slide that to the left to open this menu, and we're going to duplicate. So now we've got two exact same groups stacked on top of each other. You can't see them though because once again, they're stacked on top, so they fit perfectly on top of each other. But once we go up here to the transform arrow with uniform snapping turned on, we can flip horizontally like we did before. And now we've got this one on top of the other one. I think on that though, I'm going to go ahead and I want to flip the other one here. I want this one to be the top one. So this one here, I'm going to tap this one, select it, come up here to the arrow again, flip horizontally. So now we've got the one on the bottom there. I want this one to facing the right to be the top one there. All right. And then I'm just going to go ahead here and I'm going to move this around a little bit. I want to make sure that, once again, we don't have any tangents here. We've got a little bit of one here stuck in the back, and where these come together, those form a tangent there. So let me see, with this back one selected, so again, I'm going to go into that arrow and warp. I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to pull this ever so slightly. So that these match up just a little bit better there. Same thing here for that top one. I just might pull that completely back. I don't want this one to touch this one, so we'll pull that back. Just kind of finessing back and forth here. All right, that looks good. And then I'm going to go back then to the other new group here with the warp tool again, and just kind of finesse those around so that they match up just a little bit better. I don't know if I can pull that one completely over. I can't really pull that completely over that fin there. So I'm not super happy with that one, but that's where we're going to leave it at. We could even, if we wanted to, let me do this. Let's go into this back layer here, this new group here. Since we can't see that one, I'm going to come in under the color flats layer here. I'm just going to pull that fin back, erase there, and then underneath the reference layer, I'm just going to pull that fin completely off there. I'll have to zoom in and twist though to get really tight in here because I want to make sure I don't hit that line coming down too much. I don't want any jagged marks there. I've got a little bit of color peeking in behind there too, so I can erase that. I think that looks better the way that those meet, so we'll leave that there. All right, so next up, let's go ahead then and do our shadows and our highlights. So to begin with the shadows, let's begin with the front one here first. The light source that I've got on this, with the way that the dots are in the eyes, we've got the light source coming from this top left. So we're going to go ahead and have the highlights here, top left. Shadows will be on the bottom section and on the right section here. So knowing that, then we're ready to go ahead and move forward. So let's do that now. Got the colors palette up here. Let's go to the purple. So we've got that selected. We're going to come up here. Once again, starting with this front one. We're going to come down to layer 4. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to tap that. I'm going to set that as clipping mask. So what this does is it allows us to color in on this layer, only shows up on the parts that are colored in on layer 4. So I'm going to start to pull up some curves here, and connecting my lines as I go around. Zooming in here so we can see a little bit better. Then once I have a pretty big area connected, then I'm going to come up here to my layers menu. And this one I don't actually have to turn off reference because that one's already off here. We do need to turn off reference though on this one, because once we have areas connected, we can drag and drop our color in and it'll fill in a big portion there. If we had reference still turned on, it would fill in everything in that area just like how we colored it in. So I'll continue here, just kind of pulling in some shadows around these areas. And then once I have a pretty decent area filled in, I'm going to come up here to my layers menu, hit N for blend mode, and drop down the opacity on this. So I want this about 30%. I think that looks pretty good. I'll just kind of continue here, erasing some of those areas that overlap there, kind of pulling out some other ones so the curves and the tapers there where they meet are a little bit nicer. Same thing here, just pulling this one around so it matches the curve of that line a little bit better. Pull this tapered one back a little bit more so it meets up to a point there on that one. All right, got a little bit of a line there too I need to fix on the eye. Zooming in now, I can see that. Once I do this though, because we use that as a reference, you can see it pulls out the color too. So if you do that, you'll have to fill back in that color that got pulled out. All right, back to my purple color here and still on that layer 9 for the shadows. Just kind of fixing some of these lines as they come up. I want that curve to go exactly how it should flow. A little bit of a highlight or a shadow here inside the eye on the white of the eye. I also like a shadow here underneath the eyebrow. I don't want that pulled up too far. I want that shadow being cast by the eyebrow there. So I don't want to go too crazy with that. I think I'm going to drop down the opacity a little bit more. It's looking a little dark. About 12% looks a little bit better there. All right. Continuing on here then, I'm going to pull up a little bit more of a shadow there so it comes around that section. All right. In here, do shadow here. That spine will be given those. Pretty big heavy shadow under here. And you'll see too, why we did this with separate layers and groups is because I'm not coloring in on this fish underneath here. Since those are separate layers, we've got separate clipping masks that we're going to use. We don't have to worry about hitting any of those back there. You can kind of see what we've got there. Following this down, I pull a little bit more of a shadow here. Actually, I probably could have just done a solid shadow all the way across instead of trying to do each of those. Pulling this back down and around into the tail. And you'll see here with these lines coming around, I'm going to hit the back side of these lines. The shadow there, and then using the eraser, I can kind of pull back and taper those out a little bit. Just like that. Okay, I think that looks good. So we can go ahead and do the highlights on this section then too. Let me pull in one more shadow here underneath that one. So the highlights are going to work the same way. We're going to make a new layer. We'll tap this, set this as clipping mask, and then this time we'll hold down in the background to select white, and then we can just start to hit, once again, that top left for the way that light source is coming in. Erase that overlap there on the eyebrow, and then go ahead and do one on the eyebrow. Bringing that around, do a little bit of a highlight there. We can pull in some highlights around this fin, tapering it back where it meets that color change of the face. Kind of pulling back a little bit better of a taper there. Pulling some oval highlights here on these fins. Same thing here, we'll pull in on the top. Maybe an elongated oval there. And there. On that one. Maybe even some here inside the body as well. Once you get a really narrow one like that, holding down sometimes will not lock it in. You'll have to zoom in really far. If you're zoomed out and you're trying to do an elongated oval, it'll snap to a line. So you want to be pretty tight in there. And you'll see too, we're still not even tight enough, but you'll see too, zooming in here, I can see there's some spots there that I missed on the lines layer. That's why it's really good to zoom in and out as much as possible, because little stuff like that you'll miss. And when you get in there tight, you can see it. You can see there too, I have a little bit of that line missing there. Something happened where I erased. Fix that one. All right, back to the highlights layer here. We'll hit the side of the tail here, the edge. We would do a couple of tapered ones here. Actually, we'll pull in from the top there. All right, and then back to our layers menu, N for blend mode, dropping the opacity of that down to about 29–30%, I think looks pretty good. Now we're ready to work on that back one, kind of the same technique here. We'll go ahead and make a new layer on top of layer 4. We'll tap, set its clipping mask, get that purple. And this, I'm going to fill in just this entire back section. And we'll kind of work in reverse here. So instead of adding in, highlights here and there, we'll actually just remove highlights or remove shadows. So N for blend mode, drop that down about 23%. And then with that eraser, we can come in here and just kind of pull back. Again, the eraser, pull back some of the edges here. This makes it a lot quicker removing rather than trying to build this up a crazy amount. Pull a little bit in here. It's kind of hitting some edges. Some of them might not make sense exactly with the light source, but I don't want a solid shadow. So just removing a little bit here and there. Kind of help the viewer visualize that the area is shaded in there. All right, continuing up here, we can go ahead and hit in a pretty big section underneath. Once again, you can see, because we are on those separate layers, we're not hitting that one on top, which speeds up our process quite a bit. We don't have to be as careful of where we start and stop at. Same thing here, coming up underneath that eyebrow just a little bit. behind it. A little bit here on the bottom. And using the eraser to pull back any lines to just kind of fix them. Get inside that eye here for a little bit of a shadow. I think that's pretty good for the shadows on there. From here then, time for highlights. So same technique, new layer, tap, clipping mask, holding down in the background to select white again. And then just hitting those top left edges. Pretty big there on the cheek. Same thing here on the top lip there. The top of the bottom lip, sorry. Maybe just some tapered lines there. All right. Back to the layers menu, and for blend mode, drop the opacity on that down to about 20% or so. And there we go. Finally then, I'm just going to come in here, new layer, black, and then sign this guy, and we will be done with today's video. So X-ray fish for the letter X. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks so much. If you like today's video too, do me a favor. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell icon so you can get notified when I post new videos. We're almost done. Y and Z are the only two left. So if you've got suggestions for Y or Z, definitely leave them down in the comment section below. Love to see what you guys suggest and love to bring some of those ideas to life. So if you do follow along with any of these videos as well, share them online. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, X, Threads, any of those social medias, tag me at BJ Dell so I can check out your hard work following along with the tutorials. Really makes me know that, hey, this is not all for nothing. People are watching and following along and getting some valuable information out of it, which is my goal here. So thanks again. I appreciate it. As for me, I can be found online, bjdell.com. And until next time, keep creating.